Hey guys, tonight we're brewing something a little different. You wake up to the damp air of 19th century Brazil, the scent of wet earth and roasted beans swirling in the morning mist. There's shouting outside your humble wooden cabin on the fazenda, a man's been bitten by a snake, again. It's the third time this month. But instead of panic or prayer, the old woman down the road is already heating water and grinding beans. She swears that a strong enough brew can stop the venom. Welcome to a world where caffeine is medicine, and coffee might just save your life, or at least make you feel less doomed. You probably won't survive this snakebite, if we're honest. But the coffee? It's strangely comforting. Like a potion. A ritual. Maybe even a placebo with purpose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch your arms and squint out the window. The jungle breathes quietly in the morning haze. There's dew on the coffee leaves, rows upon rows of them stretching toward the trees. The snake-bitten man, Enrique, is cradled on a blanket while someone pours thick, black coffee into a tin mug and urges him to sip. This isn't a scene from a fever dream. In some parts of 19th century Brazil, this is medicine. You step out into the mud barefoot, because boots haven't dried yet, and the world smells like roasted heaven and wet dog. There's a dog, too. His name is Peepew, and he's useless in emergencies but very good at stealing biscuits. The woman preparing the coffee is Dona Elsa, a midwife, healer, gossip collector, and part-time wedding singer. Her method is simple: strong coffee, 3 fingers deep in the cup, no sugar. Drink fast. Then sleep. If you wake up, you're cured. Historians still argue whether this ritual had any real medicinal effect. But in a time when anti-venom was rare or non-existent in rural areas, belief carried weight, sometimes more than science. The fazenda isn't wealthy, but it's busy. Coffee beans are everywhere, in sacks, in baskets, being peeled, dried, sorted. And always being brewed. Fires never truly go out here, just glow low between brews. Coffee in Brazil wasn't just a drink by now. It was a full-blown obsession. The early 1800s saw a boom in plantations, driven by demand from Europe and North America. Brazil was becoming the world's coffee supplier, and with that expansion came people, and snakes. Pit vipers, coral snakes, bushmasters, they liked the shade and the rodent-rich environment coffee farms provided. So yes, alongside your morning shift picking beans, there was always the lingering threat of being bitten. There were 2 common responses: panic, or pouring a cup of coffee. You walk over to Enrique. His leg is swollen, but he's still conscious. He sips with trembling hands while muttering something about São Sebastião and the fact that he knew he shouldn't have gone out barefoot. A second cup is being prepared. The coffee is almost sludgy, thick, overboiled, nearly chewy. But that's how it's meant to be. The theory behind this was never fully explained, even at the time. Some said the heat from the drink countered the venom's chill. Others claimed caffeine stimulated the blood fast enough to keep poison from settling. A few genuinely believed the coffee itself had anti-venom properties. Most likely, it was just something to do. A ritual of comfort and familiarity when the unknown, snake venom, was too terrifying to sit with. You sit beside Enrique and take a sip yourself, even though you're unbitten. The taste is sharp, bitter, but grounding. Your breath slows. You watch Peepew the dog chew on a stick he stole from somewhere inappropriate. In your pocket is a crumpled note, a sketch of a snake with arrows pointing at its fangs. You've been trying to map out the ones that live closest to the fields, but honestly, you're bad at drawings. Yesterday you mistook a rock for a coiled snake and threw your lunch at it. The jungle, by contrast, isn't worried. It hums. Cicadas buzz. Somewhere, a toucan makes a sound like a haunted kazoo. Everything continues as if nothing happened. Coffee beans dry in the sun while workers, enslaved, free, or somewhere in between, carry baskets and call to each other in Portuguese, Tupi, Yoruba. This is a land stitched together by labor, myth, and survival tactics. In the distance, a child whistles a melody that's been passed down through generations. A song meant to warn snakes away, though no one's sure if it actually works or just gives the whistler something to do. Back with Enrique, a third cup is being poured. He's slumped a little now, drowsy, sweat on his brow. But he's breathing evenly. Someone murmurs a quiet prayer. Someone else wipes his forehead with a cloth soaked in, yes, more coffee. As the sun climbs higher, life resumes. Beans keep drying. Fires keep burning. Snakes keep hiding. And you begin to understand, maybe the belief isn't really about the cure. Maybe it's about taking control, over venom, over fear, over chaos. You sip again, and the cup is warm in your hands. Not a shield. Not a sword. But something gently in between. The morning heat settles in like an extra blanket, thick and clinging. You don't remember the last time you felt truly dry. Someone hauls a basket of coffee cherries past you, muttering about rain that hasn't come yet, and you watch as the beans spill slightly, dotting the dusty path like red confetti. Enrique is snoring gently now. His bitten leg's been propped up on a folded jacket, and a boy, barefoot, maybe 12, fans him lazily with a palm frond. It's not the most sterile scene, but it's familiar. Comfort, here, is improvisational. Coffee, fronds, dogs, songs. Nothing sterile. Nothing precise. You wander toward the shade where older workers rest between loads. Someone's shelling beans by hand and humming the same tune you heard earlier, the snake song. It's slower now, more like a lullaby. You settle beside them, brushing dirt off your trousers that will never actually come clean, and sip from a fresh cup someone hands you. It's strange, isn't it? How something so everyday could hold such power in people's minds. A drink, just a drink, except when it's not. Historians still argue whether the coffee cure was truly believed or more of a psychological bomb. Was it faith? Folklore? Pure caffeine distraction? No clear records exist. The stories live in oral tradition, half-whispers in diaries, scattered remarks in plantation ledgers. The medical literature from the time barely mentions it, perhaps because most physicians lived far from the snake-bitten. But the anecdotal accounts? They're vivid. Grandmothers swearing on their lives that their husbands survived because they drank 3 mugs within the hour. Travelers marveling at the local remedy, trying it themselves when a guide was nipped by something sleek and venomous. One explorer even wrote of a monkey trained to fetch strong coffee the moment someone screamed in pain. Whether he was embellishing is anyone's guess, but let's be honest, you'd train a monkey to do that if you could. You pick a bean off the drying mat and roll it between your fingers. Not ready yet. Too soft. It needs sun, and time, and flipping every so often to stop mold from creeping in. Dona Elsa joins you, her skirt soaked at the hem from the morning dew. She's carrying a bundle of dried herbs, nothing fancy, just things she likes to steep with the coffee. Not for snake bites, she clarifies, just for her joints. You nod as if you know what that means. You don't. She sits heavily, sighs through her nose, and tells you about her cousin, bit by a jararaca while foraging. Bled like a faucet, she says, but after the coffee, he stopped crying. Fell asleep in a hammock. Next day he was up and cursing at the pigs again. She chuckles softly. You don't press for scientific accuracy. This blend of folklore and necessity made 19th-century Brazilian medicine deeply improvisational. European techniques mingled with indigenous remedies and West African traditions brought by enslaved peoples. What emerged wasn't a standardized practice, it was survival by intuition. The coffee cure stood somewhere in the middle, not quite folk magic, not quite medicine. But it was accessible. Every plantation had coffee. Not every village had a doctor. You lean back against a tree stump and close your eyes for a moment. A fly buzzes near your ear. Somewhere a machete thunks into a tree. Peep-you the dog sniffs your knee, then trots off to bark at nothing. You remember a tale someone told at the edge of a campfire once, about a farmer who swore that his goats stopped dying from bites once he started spiking their water troughs with cold coffee. Another claimed to have rubbed coffee grounds directly into the wound. That one ended less well. But still. A pattern. A belief system, stitched loosely by need. There's something both absurd and charming in the idea that coffee, of all things, could serve as antidote. But when you think about it, caffeine does have stimulating effects. It quickens the pulse, sharpens the senses. Maybe it gave just enough of a jolt to keep someone conscious long enough to survive. Or maybe, as Dona Elsa says with a shrug, it kept their mouths too busy to scream. Either way, the myth stuck. Some families still tell the story today. A few old-timers even keep a thermos near the bed, just in case. Not because they expect to be bitten, but because the tale itself has power. A bedtime story for grown-ups, with a strong brew and a hopeful ending. You glance back toward Enrique. He's sitting up now, blinking slowly, asking for more coffee and a biscuit. That's a good sign. The sky is clouding over. Afternoon storms roll in quickly here, and you can already hear distant thunder. The drying mats will have to be covered soon. You rise slowly, bones complaining, and help gather the beans. The rhythm of it is soothing: scoop, pour, spread. Scoop, pour, spread. All under the soft grumble of thunder and the hiss of rising steam as someone pours another pot over the embers. You don't know if the coffee worked. You don't even know what kind of snake it was. But there's a certain magic in shared effort, in collective belief, in warm cups passed between calloused hands. And as the sky begins to drizzle and the smell of rain mingles with the ever-present coffee smoke, you feel it again, that quiet certainty that, even if it's not the cure, it's the comfort. And sometimes, that's enough. The rain doesn't pour, it whispers. A fine mist at first, brushing the tops of the coffee bushes like breath on skin. The older workers don't even pause. They've seen heavier. But you watch them anyway, every movement deliberate, as they tuck burlap over drying beans and shoo goats away from the baskets. You duck under a rusted tin awning beside the roasting shed. It clinks softly as the mist becomes a drizzle, then something steadier. The smell of wet earth is interrupted by a thick plume of roasting smoke. Someone inside is tending the fire, turning beans in a pan the size of a washtub with a bent spoon the length of your arm. You can feel the warmth radiate outward. The roasting house is where the real stories collect. Snake tales may begin in the fields, but they are fermented here, alongside the beans, hot, cracked, and exaggerated. A woman named Isadora waves you in. She's got arms like tree trunks and a laugh like gravel. She's mid-story when you step through the curtain of smoke, and then the idiot thinks it's a worm, picks it up, and wham! 2 punctures right on the thumb. Everyone chuckles. Not because snake bites are funny, but because the man survived. Coffee, Isadora adds, with a knowing glance. Bitter as sin, straight from the pot. Swore it saved his thumb. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect actual survival rates or just collective memory shaped by repetition. When enough people repeat something, it begins to take shape, like steam condensing into a cloud. You crouch by the coals, warming your hands, while another worker flips the beans. The roast is uneven, some too light, others almost black, but no one seems to care. The purpose here isn't perfection. It's volume. And maybe the occasional miracle. In 19th century Brazil, the coffee industry was a giant. By mid-century, the country supplied more than half of the world's beans. Entire towns sprang up around plantations. And while profit was king, the people doing the planting, picking, roasting, and carrying were often left to patch together their own systems of belief, healing, and survival. Medical infrastructure in the rural interior was optimistic at best. The journey to a doctor, if one existed, could take days. Antivenom wasn't available, its development would only become widespread in the 20th century. So people relied on what they had: machetes, herbs, prayers, coffee. And if that failed, hope, and someone strong enough to carry you. An old man named Teodoro settles beside you and pulls a pouch from his shirt. He rolls a cigarette slowly, fingers stained with charcoal and ash. He tells you how, as a boy, he saw his grandfather slice open a bite wound and pour coffee grounds directly into the gash. Didn't flinch, he says, shaking his head. Lived another 10 years. But smelled like burnt beans the whole time. You both laugh, low and tired. The kind of laugh that only comes when the rain takes over your workday and all that's left is waiting. Out in the mist, you spot Enrique again, now walking slowly with a limp, supported by 2 cousins and an absurdly cheerful girl who keeps handing him roasted peanuts. His color's better. He's swearing again. Everyone agrees this is a very promising sign. The drizzle turns to real rain, pounding the roof, drowning out conversation. You're handed a dented tin cup of fresh brew, black, volcanic, unforgiving. You sip. It scalds your tongue. But you feel strangely alert. And maybe that was part of it. The way coffee jolts the system. A snakebite floods the body with venom, maybe the caffeine countered some effect. Or maybe, more realistically, it helped people stay awake and upright long enough to be treated by whatever else was available: tobacco poultices, mud compresses, tightly wound tourniquets. There's no shortage of folk remedies, but coffee? Coffee was reliable. Cheap. Every house had some. Some ethnographers believe the idea of coffee as cure may have originated in Afro-Brazilian spiritual practices, where hot, bitter brews were sometimes used in ritual cleansing or awakening ceremonies. Others trace it to indigenous groups who valued bitter roots and bark infusions to treat venom and fever. No one knows for sure. But it stuck. As the rain lets up and the others begin to shuffle back outside, you stay seated for a moment longer, listening to the hiss of dying coals and the last drip of water from the edge of the roof. This is where the myth lives, not in books or lab reports, but in the pockets of time between work and weather, in the quiet defiance of people who couldn't afford to wait for science. They trusted what they had. And what they had was a bean. A child with bare feet scampers in and grabs a still warm bean from the cooling tray. Pops it into his mouth like candy. You wince. He chews, makes a face, and bolts laughing into the steam outside. Coffee here is not romanticized. It's not sipped with delicate cups on wrought iron balconies. It's utilitarian. Loud. Burnt. Revered, yes, but like an old friend you tease mercilessly while still depending on them to bail you out of trouble. You stretch, bones aching again, and follow the others outside. The clouds are thinning, and the air smells of earth and smoke. The drying mats are uncovered. The song starts again. A slow version this time, dragging just enough to match the softened ground beneath your feet. You wonder how many times, over how many years, someone has staggered out of the forest with a punctured leg, collapsed in this exact yard, and had a mug of this same brew shoved into their hands. And how many of them survived? Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe it's this: how many believed they would? The afternoon sun finally emerges, stretching across the plantation like a lazy cat. Steam rises from the damp leaves in twisting columns, curling into the air above the coffee trees. You trudge back to the rows with a basket on your hip, the beans inside still warm from the roasting shed, their fragrance mingling with the ever-present scent of wet soil and old sweat. You're back where Enrique collapsed just hours earlier. A little red ribbon now marks the spot. Someone tied it to a branch as a joke, or maybe as a warning. Superstition and humor have never been mutually exclusive in this place. You keep your eyes low, scanning the underbrush, because even though coffee might cure a bite, no one's eager to test the theory twice in 1 week. In 19th century Brazil, coffee wasn't just a crop, it was the national bloodstream. By the 1850s, São Paulo's interior was a patchwork of fazendas, many carved into the Atlantic forest with brutal efficiency. Workers, mostly enslaved Africans and their descendants, lived in cramped quarters, often surrounded by wilderness. And in that wilderness? Snakes. Lots of snakes. The jararaca, the surucucu, the coral. Some venomous, some not. But good luck guessing which when your ankle's just been punctured by something fast and scaly. You pause to stretch your back, eyeing the distant ridge where plantation houses sit on higher ground. There, the elites drink filtered coffee with cream, trade letters with Europe, and enjoy theories of enlightenment. Down here, among the underpaid and barefoot, coffee is firewood, medicine, and gospel all in one. Historians still argue whether the belief in coffee as a snakebite cure was born out of desperation or actual anecdotal success. Some point to early 19th century travel accounts that describe black brews administered post-bite, often alongside other folk treatments. Others think the whole idea spread like a game of whisper down the alley, dramatic stories with a hint of caffeine. But while academics debate, the people working these fields kept slinging grounds into wounds, mixing it with tobacco, even stuffing it in nostrils during fainting spells. A low whistle breaks your thoughts. It's Rosa, the barefoot girl with a wicked grin and a laugh like wind chimes. She's found a dried snakeskin near the water barrel and is parading it like a victory sash. You can't help but grin. Every coffee worker here walks the line between terror and performance artist. Someone suggests wrapping the snakeskin around your leg to ward off the next bite. Someone else says that's nonsense, you need to burn it and stir the ashes into your next cup for real protection. Yet another insists you must bury it under the kitchen floor, head facing west. The debates flare with gentle mischief, but you notice, no one laughs too hard. Just in case. In one of the worker huts, someone has painted a tiny red coffee bean above the doorframe. It's supposed to keep venom at bay. That, or the evil eye. Or both. The line between cause and cure is blurry here, and the science of toxicology hasn't yet arrived in any convincing form. What people do have are stories. Like the one about a man in Minas Gerais who drank an entire pot of black coffee after being bitten and sweated so violently that he sweated the venom out. Never mind that venom doesn't work like that. It's a good story. And sometimes, a good story keeps you going. You continue down the row, knees protesting with each bend, and think about how bitter coffee truly is when boiled too long. Almost metallic. Some believe this bitterness was the key, that bitterness fights poison. It sounds like nonsense, until you realize how often we still cling to metaphors in medicine. Think of the detox fads, or the belief that sweating cleanses the body. Not so different. One plantation owner supposedly had a houseboy trained to sprint at the sight of a snakebite victim with 3 things: a cup of coffee, a holy medal, and a belt for tourniquet duty. You imagine the poor boy, out of breath, juggling salvation, superstition, and caffeine in one frantic dash. Even more curious is how belief in coffee's curative properties sometimes bled into formal records. A few 19th century Brazilian home medical guides listed coffee as beneficial to the circulation and reviving in case of traumatic fright. And a snakebite, if nothing else, is certainly traumatic. Back under the trees, you spot a faded sign nailed to a trunk, something about drying schedules and bean grades, but someone's drawn a snake curled around the letters, little fangs etched with charcoal. You shake your head. Even literacy is filtered through folklore here. And still, it makes a strange kind of sense. When everything around you has the power to maim or kill, and you're given nothing but calluses and caffeine to fight back, belief becomes a survival tactic. Whether or not coffee ever truly neutralized venom may be beside the point. It offered agency. A weapon, however symbolic. Rosa skips ahead and calls back over her shoulder, "Better drink up tonight, rain stirs them." You glance at the sky, where clouds are already returning, bruised and heavy with promise. She's probably right, the rain begins again in the late afternoon, not with a roar, but a slow whisper, like someone tipping a basin of warm water onto 1,000 leaves at once. You duck beneath the wide fronds of a banana plant, the broad green canopy shielding your head but not your feet, which are already soaked through. A familiar earthy scent rises up, wet bark, fermented fruit, and the bittersweet tang of coffee cherries crushed underfoot. Around you, the world turns soggy and slower. Frogs chirp from somewhere in the ditches, and the sky goes a few shades darker, like the world's about to be steeped in hot water. Again. The field supervisor calls the day early. Nobody protests. You and the others shuffle back toward the work camp with the resigned gait of people who've seen this pattern 100 times: work, storm, drip dry, repeat. Tonight, there'll be a fire in the communal shelter, maybe a game of cards or dominoes. And, as always, coffee. A pot sits at the ready in the kitchen hut, blackened from years of firewood smoke. Its handle is wrapped in cloth to prevent burns. Even children know to respect that pot. It's always on. Not because someone might want a drink, but because someone always will. You settle in on a low stool and watch the brew bubble. There's no measuring here, just instinct. A handful of grounds, a splash of yesterday's boiled water, and maybe a pinch of sugar if someone's been lucky. Coffee, in this world, is no dainty affair. It's tar-thick, gritty, and so strong it might be illegal in France. It's more ritual than refreshment. You sip and feel it scrape down your throat like a bitter promise. A man named Joao, older than the trees he picks from, begins to tell a story. You know the one already, it's a favorite. About the boy who survived a surucucu bite by drinking an entire gourd of black coffee, then falling into a sleep so deep, even the venom gave up. He woke up singing, Joao says, grinning. You laugh, because of course he did. Historians still debate where this specific legend came from. Some trace it to Afro-Brazilian spiritual practices, where coffee served both medicinal and ceremonial roles. Others think it's just one of those stories that grows legs, starting as a fluke survival and gaining poetry with each retelling. Across the room, a young woman named Sonia massages her calf. Felt something brush me today, she mutters. Someone offers her another cup, just in case. This is how it works here, you don't wait for proof. You react, you prepare, you caffeinate. It wasn't always this way. Before the coffee boom, other treatments dominated Brazil's folk medicine. Herbal poultices, smoke fumigations, and even mashed-up fire ants, yes, ants, were once used against snake venom. But once coffee became king, it started elbowing its way into every cure. There's a half-laughed theory that coffee gained its curative reputation simply because it was always there. When someone got bit, coffee was the only hot thing on hand. So it went in the wound, into the mouth, under the tongue. Anywhere you could put it. There's even a record of one plantation midwife using coffee as an antiseptic. Not because she believed it killed germs, no one knew what germs were yet, but because it smelled clean. And in a world where most things didn't, that counted for something. You lean your head back against the wooden wall, eyes fluttering shut, the murmur of rain and Joao's storytelling wrapping around you like a warm rag. The fire crackles. Someone feeds it more wood, and for a moment, you imagine you can smell the rainforest itself burning, just a wisp, hidden in the steam. Then a thud at the door. A boy, panting, one hand clutching his shoulder. You're up before your brain even processes. The others gather fast. He says the word everyone dreads but expects, snake. His cousin, still in the field, didn't see it until too late. They were chasing a runaway goat near the stream, and the snake struck from the underbrush. No one saw the species. No one has time. Sonia grabs the pot of coffee. Someone else grabs a belt. A third runs to find the plantation medic, who is, charitably, not much more than a man with a satchel of herbs and a list of contradictions. Back out in the rain, feet slipping in the mud, you run. The cousin is pale, sweating, and shivering. The bite is high up on his thigh, bad news. Blood oozes slowly, mixed with rainwater. Sonia lifts the pot to his lips. "Drink," she says. He does. Coughs. Drinks again. Coffee trickles down his chin. Someone applies the tourniquet. The medic arrives, finally, squinting like the weather offends him. He nods at the coffee. "Can't hurt," he mutters, and begins to unpack a handful of leaves you don't recognize. The rain turns steady. People form a loose circle around the boy, whispering prayers, arguing over snake types. Was it thick-bodied? Striped? Did it rattle? No one agrees. But everyone agrees on this: if he survives, it'll be the coffee. You stand, hands on your knees, breath catching in your throat. 100 legends crowd your mind. The boy who sang. The man who danced. The woman who claimed she could taste venom on her tongue, and burn it out with 3 sips of roast. Maybe it's nonsense. Maybe it's just something to believe in. But in a place like this, sometimes a bitter brew is the only thing standing between you and fear. You stay with the boy until long after the rain has let up. The circle around him loosens. Some people head back to camp, muttering about wet socks and missed dinners, but a few stay crouched by his side, watching his breathing, whispering reassurances not meant for him but for themselves. The medic says the swelling's not as bad as it could be. If it was Jararaca, he says, half to himself, he'd be worse by now. No one corrects him, though everyone silently notes that's what he said last time too. The boy drifts in and out of consciousness. His lips are stained dark, like he's been eating berries, or drinking too much of the plantation brew. Someone wipes his forehead with a cloth dipped in river water. It smells faintly of ash and eucalyptus. You squat nearby, staring at the pot now resting in the grass. Still warm. Still steaming. And you think about how this drink has wormed its way into medicine cabinets and myth in equal measure. Later, when things settle, you'll hear another story around the fire, the one about the traveling priest who used coffee to draw out evil spirits. He brewed it with holy water, served it with psalms. Said the caffeine jolted the demons loose. Or maybe, someone will chuckle, he just wanted to stay awake through confessions. That's the other half of these stories. They're equal parts survival and satire. A way to cope with the jungle, the labor, the endless hiss of something dangerous just beyond the edge of your vision. Historians still argue whether Brazil's coffee as cure culture came from desperation or genuine belief. Some see it as a clever adaptation, people doing what they could with what they had. Others think it's just a superstition brewed strong by repetition. Either way, by the late 1800s, coffee had become the go-to remedy not just for snakebites but for nearly everything: stomachaches, headaches, spiritual malaise, heartbreak. The plantation physician, if you were lucky enough to have one, might prescribe quinine or vinegar-soaked rags, but the workers? They reached for coffee. And not just orally. You've heard the murmurs about other methods. In one region, people boiled coffee with garlic and eucalyptus leaves and bathed in it. In another, mothers dabbed coffee on their children's gums when they were teething, though it often resulted in a generation of toddlers buzzing around like angry wasps. There's even a tale of a man who poured cooled coffee directly into a snakebite wound. He lived, though whether from luck or caffeine remains unclear. You sit with your back to a tree and close your eyes, letting the humid air coat your skin. The smell of wet earth clings to everything. There's a peace in these moments after crisis. No one speaks above a whisper, and even the forest seems to exhale. Behind your eyelids, the plantation rises in your mind again. The fields, vast and green. The drying sheds, warm and rich with scent. And always, somewhere in the background, a pot bubbling quietly, like a heart still beating through it all. You remember the first time you tasted it. You were a child, barely tall enough to see over the table. An aunt gave you a sip from her cup, too strong, too bitter, but you didn't say anything. Because this was what grown-ups did. This was what strength tasted like. Now, as an adult, you've come to crave it not just for the flavor, but for the ritual. The grounding. The way it marks time, before coffee, after coffee. The rhythm of a day measured in sips. There's a shift in the breeze. A scent rises, burned breadfruit. Someone's trying to make dinner over wet firewood again. You stand and stretch, the ache in your back blooming like a flower. The boy, you notice, is still breathing. Still here. You nod once, to no one in particular, and head back toward the camp. Night comes on slow and thick. The air smells of smoke and wet fabric. A few stars struggle through the cloud cover, blinking shyly like they're unsure whether they're welcome. You settle down near the fire, where a few others are still awake, swapping stories and slowly roasting cassava on a stick. Someone starts talking about the snake whisperer of Minas Gerais, a woman who claimed she could command serpents with her voice alone. Said she was bitten 3 times and lived each time thanks to her secret brew, coffee, lime, and a single red chili. She died of a fever though, someone adds, as if to remind you that magic has its limits. There's laughter. Not cruel, just tired. You take another sip from your cup. It's gone lukewarm, the bitterness mellowed. You let it sit on your tongue. Here, in the dark, coffee becomes more than a drink again. It's a kind of talisman. A defense against the wild. A thing you can boil and sip and believe in, when everything else is slippery or invisible. There's a comfort in that. Even if it's not real. Even if it's just a warm lie in a clay cup. You tilt your head back and watch the embers drift skyward. Someone strums a soft tune on a 4-string guitar. The boy, back in the medic's hut, is probably asleep. Hopefully healing. And if he makes it through the night, you all know what you'll say in the morning. It was the coffee. The next morning, the sun rises late. Or maybe the clouds are just heavy again. Either way, the camp is slow to stir. You wake to the distant coughing of someone trying to start a fire with damp sticks, the low murmur of voices near the medic's hut, and, of course, the smell, dark, earthy, unmistakable, of coffee. You shuffle out of your hammock, joints creaking like an old floorboard. The ground is still soft from the storm, and your boots sink slightly as you walk. Over near the hut, a small group has gathered, quiet and curious. You follow, blinking sleep from your eyes. The boy is sitting up. A thin blanket draped over his shoulders. Eyes hollow, cheeks pale, but he's awake. Someone hands him a tin cup of something, and he sips like he's forgotten how mouths work. Then he closes his eyes and leans back, as if the world is too heavy to look at just yet. He's going to be fine, the medic whispers to you. I think. You nod. You don't say it out loud, but everyone's thinking it, the coffee worked. Again. It doesn't matter how many times someone points out that the venom might have missed a major vein, or that the rain might have helped slow the spread, or that the boy was simply young and lucky. That's not what sticks in people's minds. What sticks is that he drank the bitter brew, and survived. That kind of story has legs. It walks from mouth to mouth, from plantation to plantation. It changes a little each time, like a riverbank after a flood, but the core stays the same, coffee saves. By now, you've learned that nearly every fazenda has its own version. In Bahia, they steep orange peel in with the beans and swear it cures heartbreak. In Parana, they mash ripe bananas into the grounds before brewing and say it helps with fevers. In Para, someone once made a poultice out of coffee, honey, and crushed fire ants, but no one talks about how that ended. Historians still argue whether these regional variations stem from indigenous healing traditions, African folk medicine, or the desperate creativity of undersupplied workers. Probably a blend. Brazil, after all, is a country built on mixtures. You walk back toward the fire, where breakfast is being cooked, plantains, rice, and a few beans if you're lucky. Someone hands you a cup. You don't need to ask what's inside. One sip and the world sharpens slightly. The jungle seems less threatening. Your limbs feel just a little more cooperative. Strong today, someone remarks. Had to be, another replies. After last night. Coffee has always been about more than flavor. It's about context. You sip it while mourning, while mending, while planning or giving up entirely. It's the backdrop for decisions big and small. Whether you're a general or a gardener, a snake-bitten boy or a bone-tired worker, you reach for the same bitter warmth. There's a story someone tells while you eat, a story of a French botanist who came to Brazil in the 1800s, chasing orchids and adventure. He caught a fever, nearly died, but swore that black coffee brought him back. Better than quinine, he later wrote, and easier on the tongue. You suspect he was only half joking. After breakfast, work resumes. The sky is still low and gray, but the sun peeks through in patches, like a cat batting at a curtain. The fields stretch out ahead, lush, unruly, damp. You join the others, trudging toward the rows. There's weeding to be done, sorting, carrying. Always carrying. As you work, the jungle hums its own kind of lullaby. Birds you can't name call out across the canopy. Frogs gurgle somewhere near the river. A distant howl reminds you that the forest always has more eyes than you do. And yet, you feel oddly calm. It's the coffee, probably. Someone behind you starts humming, then adds words. It's a slow tune, about a snake with golden eyes and a heart full of regret. You don't know the origin, but it has that timeless sound, like something people have been singing since before maps had borders. You keep moving, hand over hand, rhythm matching breath. Later in the day, you'll hear another tale, the story of a plantation owner who refused to drink coffee. Said it was peasant nonsense. Preferred imported brandy and French perfume. One day, he got bit by a coral snake. His workers begged him to take the brew, but he refused. They say he died before sunset. No one really liked the man, but still, everyone tells the story with a shrug and a sip. Should have had the coffee. Historians still debate whether coffee's role as a folk remedy slowed or advanced Brazilian medicine. Did it fill a gap left by poor access to doctors? Or did it delay the acceptance of modern treatments? The truth is likely both. But for you, and for the people who live this reality daily, those questions feel distant. Academic. The kind of things discussed over polished tables in rooms that don't smell like wet soil and smoke. Out here, truth is more immediate. The boy is alive. The work continues. The rain might come back tonight. And the coffee? It's always there. In your cup. In your veins. In the stories you'll tell once the sun goes down again. You pause for a moment, stretch your arms wide, and glance at the treetops. The light filters through like tea through cheesecloth, golden, dappled, a little sleepy. You smile to yourself. Yes. Definitely the coffee. The heat settles into the day like a cat on your chest, comfortable at first, then slowly suffocating. Your shirt clings to your back. Sweat trickles into your eyes, and the air is heavy with the scent of wet bark and scorched leaves. It's the kind of weather that makes people start seeing visions or snapping at shadows. And yet, no one stops. The work in the coffee fields doesn't allow it. You move through the rows with practiced steps, careful not to twist an ankle on a root or disturb a resting snake. After last night, everyone's a little more cautious about where they place their feet. One of the older men, Joao, now insists on tapping the ground with a stick before each step, muttering something about asking permission from the spirits. No one mocks him. Not anymore. During a break, you gather with a few others beneath a tree whose name you've forgotten but whose shade is sacred. Someone passes around a tin of roasted cassava. Someone else brews another round of coffee using a dented kettle and a stocking as a filter. It tastes faintly of metal and wood smoke. And then the stories start again. Because that's what always happens when there's coffee. This time, it's a tale from Maranhão. A grandmother cured her grandson's spider bite by brewing coffee so thick it stood a spoon upright. She mixed in crushed garlic, chili powder, and the ash from 3 eucalyptus leaves. He screamed until Tuesday, someone says, but the swelling went down. Whether it was the coffee or the crying that did the trick, no one agrees. Historians still argue, you say aloud, mimicking a nasal, educated tone, whether coffee's curative reputation emerged from scientific observation, or sheer desperation. Everyone laughs, especially Joao, who nearly spills his tin cup. You should be a professor, he tells you, if you ever grow tired of hauling sacks. You smile and lean back against the tree. The truth is, people have tried to study this. In the 1880s, a physician in São Paulo recorded hundreds of miraculous recoveries attributed to coffee. Snakebites, fever, toothaches, melancholy, he catalogued them all, sometimes with careful notes, sometimes with bemused skepticism. His findings were never published, likely dismissed by peers who preferred cleaner cases and cleaner fingernails. But fragments of that research survive, whispers in libraries, scribbled margins, unpublished diaries. Somewhere in a faded leather notebook, a doctor once wrote, observed, patient stung by scorpion. Treated with coffee and prayer. Survived. Not sure which helped more. Of course, not every story ends in survival. There's a girl named Taina. Or was. It's hard to know if the story's true or just a warning told to newcomers. She was bitten while swimming in the river, the current carrying her a mile downstream before anyone noticed. By the time they pulled her out, her skin was turning gray. They poured coffee down her throat, rubbed it into her limbs, even whispered healing songs they weren't supposed to know. She died anyway. Some say that's why the trees near that stretch of river lean funny, like they're still grieving. But even in that story, coffee isn't the villain. It's the last hope. The thing you try when all else fails, when the medicine cabinet's empty, and the doctor's half a day away by horse. You hear another tale from someone who used to work near the Amazon. Their plantation was built on land so wild even the birds seemed angry. The snakes were smarter than we were, they say, and they liked to test us. One day, a foreman was bitten on both legs at once, 1 snake per calf. They boiled coffee until it bubbled like lava, the story goes, and poured it directly into the wounds. He lived. Barely. And never walked right again. But he swore by the treatment, claimed it gave him visions of a woman with a crown of beans who taught him the names of all jungle plants. Madness, someone chuckles. But their tone is soft. Respectful, even. Because in these parts, madness and magic are first cousins. You get up to stretch, your muscles tight from sitting too long in one position. The tree creaks behind you, leaves fluttering like tired hands. Above, the sky has turned a syrupy yellow, the hour before dusk, when time feels slower and shadows longer. Back to work, then. You help with the hauling now, burlap sacks filled with beans that will be dried, roasted, and maybe exported to far-off places you've only read about. Paris, London, Boston. Cities where people sip coffee from porcelain cups and debate philosophy, unaware that their drink might once have shared a pot with snake venom and sweat. You wonder what they'd think if they knew. Probably wouldn't believe you. Or worse, they'd publish a study claiming coffee cures snakebites based on local lore, without ever stepping foot in a jungle. There's a rhythm to the work now, slow and heavy, like a drum played with gloved hands. You find comfort in it, strange as that sounds. The weight, the repetition, the breath between tasks. It dulls the mind just enough to quiet the louder thoughts. Evening approaches. Someone hums a tune you can't place. A lullaby, maybe. Or a morning song. Out here, they often sound the same. You reach the final row and glance over your shoulder. The boy from the night before is walking slowly with a limp, but he's upright. A few people are helping him carry small tools, keeping his arms free. He sees you and nods. You nod back. No words needed. The last rays of sun fall across the field, turning the beans a deep, golden brown. It looks like something from a painting, if you squint past the dirt and bugs and exhaustion. Tomorrow will be the same. And the day after that. Until the rains stop, or the snakes do. But tonight, at least, you'll sit by the fire with a tin cup in hand, listening to stories and adding your own. Because you've lived one now. A coffee tale worth telling. And you're just getting started. The fire crackles low, just enough to toast the air in front of your face without fighting the cool that's begun to settle across your shoulders. You sit on a log that creaks like a ship's mast every time you shift your weight. Around you, the men and women of the plantation take their usual places, some cross-legged, some stretched out, others hunched with elbows on knees and cups in hand. This isn't just rest. It's ritual. Coffee is boiling in an old tin kettle with a dent on one side that someone swears came from deflecting a jaguar's paw. You doubt the story, but then again, the man who tells it is missing 3 fingers. Maybe not so doubtful after all. As the aroma rises, bittersweet and smoky, it feels like a second wind. Not the kind that makes you want to run, but the kind that keeps your eyes open and your memories soft. It's in this atmosphere that the evening story begins. Tonight, it's Maria's turn. She's not the loudest, or the oldest, but people lean in when she talks. Her voice has that slow cadence, the one that makes you picture every word. She speaks of a family from Pernambuco, generations ago, who kept a pet snake. Not just any snake, a jararaca, the kind with venom sharp enough to kill a mule. But this one, she says, had been bitten itself as a hatchling. Saved by coffee. It grew up with the children, Maria says, guarded them at night, slept in their bed during winter. You glance around. Half the group is smiling. The other half looks quietly terrified. One day, she continues, a thief came. He thought the farm would be easy prey. But the snake was faster. Bit him twice before anyone heard a sound. And then came the twist. The family, loyal to their pet but afraid of the law, tried to save the thief, with coffee. Boiled dark, she says. Boiled strong. Poured on the wounds. And in his mouth. He survived. Ran back to town with the story. Said he'd rather rob a barracks than that house again. Maria takes a sip and smirks. Historians still argue whether that story's true, or if it was just a bedtime warning to keep kids from wandering off. Someone laughs. Someone else mutters, even if it's fake, I still wouldn't touch a jararaca. You lean back, letting your eyes wander up to the sky. The stars are peeking out now, one by one, like the lanterns of old saints. You think of how many stories begin like this, under the stars, with coffee in hand and danger on the edge of memory. As the tales wind down, you feel the shift, the part of night when silence becomes easier than speech. A few people nod off where they sit, heads tilting like tired sunflowers. The fire dims, glowing more than burning. You toss in a stick, and it hisses a protest. It's time for bed, but first, you walk to the storehouse, where old crates are stacked like history's filing cabinets. You push past the coffee sacks, careful not to jostle the mouse nest someone warned you about, and find what you're looking for, the small wooden chest marked, Cura Antiga. It's a kind of joke. Inside are all the strange cures people have tried, or claimed to try, over the years. Bottles with unknown contents. Bundles of herbs. A spoon carved from some bone you'd rather not identify. And a leather-bound notebook. Fragile at the spine, but still legible. You open it to a random page. August 12, 1859. Patient, female, age unknown, presumed 40s. Bitten by unknown snake. Administered black coffee with molasses. Wound wrapped in boiled palm leaves. Recovery partial, hallucinations persistent. You flip again. May 2, 1872. Male, 19. Bitten on toe while harvesting bananas. Immediate coffee enema, suggested by older sibling. Survived. Unclear if due to method or miracle. You almost choke at that one. That particular treatment hasn't come up around the fire, yet. The book is a treasure trove of earnest guesswork. You imagine these old doctors, half hopeful, half desperate, scribbling by candlelight, trying to preserve wisdom that no one else would believe. Some of the entries have diagrams. Most don't. A few are splattered with something that might be ink, or something else. Historians still argue, you whisper, whether this notebook was a real medical journal, or just a collection of folk experiments scribbled by someone who liked drama. You tuck it under your arm anyway. Tomorrow you'll show Joao. He'll love the one about the woman who claimed coffee made her immune to mosquito bites if she rubbed it behind her ears. As you step outside again, the moonlight catches on a spiderweb, stringing it like a harp across the beams of the shed. You pause, half expecting it to hum. But there's only the breeze. And somewhere distant, the yip of a fox or a dog or something less comfortable. You make your way to the bunkhouse where hammocks sway in long rows. You settle into yours, the canvas hugging your sides like a papoose. The night is thick and warm. But the stories, the laughter, the notebook, they cool your thoughts like a damp cloth to the forehead. You close your eyes. Even now, with the danger past, the legends spin quietly behind your lids. A coffee-cured snake turned protector. A thief healed by the brew he came to steal. Doctors who tried everything, including pouring caffeine into every available orifice. And you, living history, just trying to stay bite-free one more day, the next morning hums to life with that peculiar rural symphony, roosters crowing with all the urgency of a naval alarm, insects already buzzing like they've had 2 cups of coffee themselves, and the wooden floorboards creaking under the feet of sleepy workers dragging themselves toward another long day under the sun. You roll out of your hammock, legs tangled in the blanket you swore would stay neatly tucked this time. No such luck. You land on the ground with a soft grunt, the notebook from last night still cradled against your chest. Your bunkmates stir. Joao blinks at you from his hammock like he's unsure whether he's still dreaming. Did the ghost of Dom Pedro drop off bedtime reading again? You toss the notebook at his hammock. Read the May 2nd entry. He flips through, squints, and then wheezes with laughter. That poor guy. Breakfast is simple, cassava cakes, some leftover beans, and a cup of coffee so strong it could probably melt through tin. You drink it slowly, watching the steam curl upward like it's trying to escape history itself. Someone mutters that there's a snake sighting near the drying yard. Another jokes that someone should go see if it needs a cappuccino. The notebook has sparked something. Suddenly, everyone has a snakebite story, half real, half folklore, and most suspiciously specific. One man claims his grandfather once survived a coral snake bite because he was drunk on cachaca and mistook coffee grounds for tobacco, stuffing them into the wound by accident. He passed out and woke up fine. Hungover, but not dead. You spend the rest of the morning hauling sacks of beans and dodging bees, but the conversation doesn't leave your mind. You begin to wonder, why coffee? What made 19th century Brazilians reach for that black brew every time fangs sank into flesh? After lunch, you take a rare break from fieldwork and head toward the old archives. Not the official ones, that's for city types in stiff suits. These are tucked behind the chapel, inside a storage shed that smells like mildew, old wax, and bat droppings. You find a ledger dated 1834. The handwriting is jagged and spidery, like the writer was being chased by something while recording each line. Coffee used topically after bite. No swelling after 3 hours. Patient says it felt like the snake apologized. Another reads, boiled grounds applied with sugar. Patient healed, but claims to have dreamed in Portuguese and Tupi simultaneously for 3 nights. You begin to spot a pattern. Coffee wasn't just a home remedy, it was part medicine, part charm, part superstition. There are entries describing it as a cooling agent, others noting it kept patients awake long enough for natural healing, and a few that hint at more metaphysical beliefs. One entry stops you cold. January 7, 1822. Bitten during harvest. Healer performed chant, poured hot coffee over feet, lit cigar. Said the caffeine carried out the serpent's memory. Patient survived. Now says snakes avoid him. You look up from the page, suddenly aware of just how deeply this belief ran. Coffee wasn't just comfort. It was protection. It was ritual. It was, in some pockets of the countryside, almost divine. Historians still argue whether this was a result of poor access to formal medicine, colonial pharmaceutical improvisation, or something older, deeper. A belief that nature could be negotiated with, provided you had the right offering. And what better offering than coffee, Brazil's sacred bean? You tuck the ledger under your arm and return to the bunkhouse as clouds roll in overhead. Rain begins to fall in thick, lazy drops that splatter against banana leaves like coins dropped in a fountain. You sit on the steps, watching the world soften under the storm. Across the yard, a few workers take shelter in the tool shed. Someone's playing a marimba, its gentle twang cutting through the rain like thread through cloth. You sway to its rhythm without realizing it. Beside you, Joao finally looks up from the notebook. People believed in coffee the way they believed in saints, he says. You didn't ask for proof. You just hoped it liked you. He tells you a story then, softer than the others. About his aunt, who kept a vial of dried coffee grounds in her pocket, tied in a bit of cloth. In case the snakes came, he says. Or the bad dreams. Or both. He never saw her use it. But he always felt safer when she was nearby. You nod. It makes sense. In a world where everything bites, everything stings, everything slithers, or crawls or hides, belief is half the cure. You stand, stretch, and breathe in the petrichor, wet soil, crushed leaves, and yes, even coffee lingering from someone's tin mug. You begin to walk, no particular destination in mind, just following the rhythm of the rain. Past the drying yard, where burlap sacks steam gently. Past the chicken coop, where one brave hen pecks defiantly at a puddle. And finally, past the edge of the plantation, where the jungle begins to breathe heavier. You hesitate, just for a moment. You remember the stories, about snakes in trees, snakes in boots, snakes in dreams. Then, half defiantly, you reach into your pocket and pull out a handful of grounds from your morning cup. You scatter them at your feet like an offering. Maybe it means nothing. But maybe, just maybe. It means you walk back in peace. The next few days roll by like a lazy ox cart through thick mud, slow, rhythmic, and oddly satisfying. The plantation moves to the tune of weather and daylight, and you begin to forget what day it is. Only the smell of the beans, the angle of the sun, and the gossip of your fellow workers remind you that time still has some direction. But one thing keeps circling your mind like a curious bird overhead, the way those old texts treated coffee less like a beverage and more like a tool. A substance. A character in the human drama. You decide to keep asking questions. Not to the books this time, but to the people who live with the land. Your first stop is Dona Marieta, the unofficial midwife, healer, and overall keeper of strange knowledge. She lives just past the main gate in a blue-washed hut with faded flower pots and one suspiciously judgmental cat. You bring her a fresh loaf of cornbread as a bribe, which works immediately. She waves you in, shoos the cat off a stool, and starts talking before you even sit. "Snakebite?" she asks, not even looking at you. You nod. She scoffs, slicing the cornbread like she's preparing for battle. Foolish things, snakes. But not as foolish as the men who provoke them. You'd be amazed how many think they can flirt with the jungle like it's a barmaid. You chuckle, then gently steer the conversation. "And the coffee?" She raises an eyebrow. "You think the bean cures the bite?" "I think a lot of people once did," you say. Donna Marietta leans back and taps her fingers on the tabletop. "Coffee wakes the blood," she says finally. "That's what we used to say. It keeps the soul inside the body just long enough for it to mend." The old people, they had reasons for every remedy. But not all those reasons came from science. She tells you about how her mother used to mash coffee grounds into a paste with garlic and lard, then apply it to cuts and bruises. To draw out the bad. Or at least the boredom. One of her cousins, she says, swore coffee cured his fevers, not by drinking it, but by wrapping hot beans in a cloth and placing it under his armpits. He smelled like a bakery gone mad, but he never missed work. Historians still debate whether these remedies held any medicinal merit or if they were simply acts of desperation, shaped by isolation and oral tradition. When hospitals were miles away, or didn't exist at all, what else did you trust but the land? Or your grandmother's weird little poultice? You ask if people really believed it cured venom. Donna Marietta snorts. "Child, they believed it could do anything if you asked it nicely enough." And then she adds, half-whispered, as though worried the cat might gossip, "There was a man who claimed he rubbed coffee grounds on his legs every day so snakes would avoid him. Said the bitterness seeped through his pores and made him taste bad." "Did it work?" you ask. She shrugs. "He died at 94. In his sleep. No snakes." You leave her hut feeling both more enlightened and more amused. The cat glares at you on the way out, as if to say, "Try snake oil next time." That evening, back at the bunkhouse, you sit around a small fire with a few of the younger workers, telling them what you've learned. One of them, barely 16, offers a new theory, that the heat of coffee opened the skin's pores, letting the venom breathe out. Like sweating out a hangover, he explains earnestly, nodding like he's just cracked the case. Another thinks the caffeine makes the blood run faster, so it outruns the poison. Everyone agrees that this sounds scientific enough to repeat later with confidence. You all laugh as the fire crackles and the night deepens. Someone produces a battered guitar and strums a sleepy tune. Another hums along. No one mentions snakes, not directly, but they don't have to. You feel something settling around you, a sense that you're not chasing a mystery anymore, but rather walking slowly beside it. Like two old friends on a dusty road. Later, in the quiet dark of your hammock, the sounds of the jungle rise again, frogs singing opera, insects fiddling like they're in a jazz trio, and something rustling out by the water trough that you pray is just a goat. You lie there thinking about the stories, about the ledger, about Donna Marietta and her garlic coffee paste. You wonder if belief itself has weight. If generations pressing meaning into a bean can make that bean do more than just taste good. And then, like an old film projector flickering to life, you remember something from earlier, something odd in one of those field journals. It wasn't just snake bites. You remember a page mentioning scorpion stings, dog bites, even heartbreak. All of them treated with coffee. You close your eyes, already drifting, and murmur into the night. Maybe it wasn't about the snake at all. You rise the next morning with the taste of Donna Marietta's cornbread still lingering in your mouth and the memory of that field journal page dancing somewhere just out of reach. The air is damp, the kind of warm humid that makes your collar cling and your thoughts move slow. Still, you have a new mission. Today, you decide, it's time to head into the town proper. After a half-hour walk down a rutted road lined with wild hibiscus and half-curious cows, you arrive at the main village, a small sprawl of ochre-painted buildings with shuttered windows and sun-faded signs. There's a barbershop that never has customers, a bakery that smells like roasted sugar, and a dusty general store with a hand-painted coffee pot on the door that squeaks each time someone enters. You head to the records room. Every town has one, even if they don't call it that. Sometimes it's a church basement, sometimes a teacher's desk. Here, it's the back corner of the old schoolhouse, now used mostly for town meetings and the occasional birthday party. Inside, it smells like old wood and dryer mold. You find a woman named Irene, stooped but alert, her gray hair twisted into an impressive coil that seems to defy gravity. She asks what you're looking for, and when you say, medical notes, she narrows her eyes suspiciously, then leads you to a cabinet that looks like it hasn't been opened since Brazil had an emperor. The folders are hand-labeled, some in Portuguese, others in barely legible cursive that curls like vines. You lose track of time thumbing through the paper until you stumble upon something that makes you stop mid-breath. A booklet titled, Curas Populars do Sorteio, Café e Outras Magias, Popular Cures of the Backlands, Coffee and Other Magics. You flip it open. The first few pages are general ailments and home treatments, soothing teas for sleepless babies, burned corn husk for toothache. But then, there it is. Para mordida de cobra, café forte, aplicado sobre o local e tomado quente, repetidamente, en quanto se reza uma Ave Maria. For snakebite, strong coffee, applied to the wound and drunk hot, repeatedly, while reciting a Hail Mary. You smile. There's something charmingly desperate about it. Something human. But the instructions go further. A marginal note scribbled in a different hand adds, Melhor se o café for do tipo preto, ne o adicado, o acucara triador. Better if the coffee is black, unsweetened, sugar attracts the pain. Whether or not that's medically true is beside the point. The belief has its own logic, shaped by centuries of pattern and repetition. Historians still argue whether these healing rituals were born from actual medicinal benefit or simply the comfort of structure, of having something to do while waiting out the worst. You copy the passage down, word for word, then gently close the booklet and thank Irene with an offering of fresh guava. She accepts with a nod and says, "You know, I once met a man who said coffee healed his broken heart. Drank 5 cups the morning his wife left. Did it work? Eventually. Or he got used to the loneliness. Same thing." You walk back to the plantation slowly, the booklet's words swirling in your mind. You begin to notice just how many people are drinking coffee, not just in the morning, but throughout the day. During breaks. While fixing a wagon. Even while fixing a broken heart, perhaps. You arrive to find João, the foreman, sitting on a barrel with a cloth tied around his forearm. You ask if he's hurt. He says a bee stung him. You offer to fetch water or ice. He grins and says, "I already took care of it." How? Held a hot mug of coffee to it. You blink. Seriously? Heat distracts the sting, he says. Or maybe the caffeine scares it out. You're starting to see a pattern. Not just in how people use coffee, but how they think with it. It's the Swiss Army knife of colonial Brazil, a stimulant, a comfort, a cultural ritual, and apparently, a venom vacuum. You start collecting stories. Small ones. Personal ones. One woman says her grandmother used to put coffee grounds in her shoes to ward off fever. A man swears by a nightly ritual of washing his hands in warm brew before sleep, claiming it keeps bad dreams away. Another worker, clearly teasing you, says he once bathed in cold coffee after losing a bet and felt blessed by the spirits of productivity. And yet, underneath the jokes and half-truths, there's a reverence. A sense that coffee was never just for sipping. It was a partner in survival. An ally in the uncertain jungle of existence. Later that evening, you find yourself at the edge of the plantation again, staring at the horizon as the sun slides down like it's clocking out early. You sit on a low stone wall, drinking a tin cup of thick black brew that tastes like it's been boiled twice and forgotten once. A soft breeze kicks up, and with it comes the distant sound of crickets and slow laughter from the workers' quarters. The air carries the scent of roasted beans and soil, earthy, alive, calming. You wonder how many people through history have sat just like this, thinking the same thought. If I just have one more cup, maybe I'll be all right. The moon is high when you finally return to your room, the mug long empty, your mind buzzing with the caffeine you pretended wouldn't affect you. The coffee might be helping your curiosity more than any actual ailments, but you're no closer to understanding whether people really believed it could pull venom from a bite, or if it was simply a warm distraction during frightening hours. The next morning, you wake before the sun. The room is cool, the kind of cool that settles over wood floors and stone walls before the tropical day starts cooking again. Roosters shout somewhere in the distance. You sit up, stretch, and already crave coffee, not from addiction, you tell yourself, but in pursuit of knowledge. You head to the kitchen, where Marietta's daughter, Clara, is heating water over a charcoal stove. She's half asleep, humming a tune you don't recognize. When you ask her if she's ever heard of people using coffee to treat snakebites, she stops stirring and squints. You mean like the old wives say? She asks. Exactly like that. She nods slowly, then pulls up a rickety stool for you. My uncle had a story, she begins, in the tone of someone who's told this many times but still enjoys the telling. He was working in the forest, cutting vines for basket weaving, when a jararaca bit his leg. No one was near, and he was bleeding fast. He thought he was going to die. But he had his coffee canteen. Boiling hot, black as night. He poured it over the bite. Drank the rest. Said he saw stars, then blacked out. You wait. And? He woke up 2 days later. Fever broke. Bite was ugly, but he survived. Always said it was the coffee that saved him. You raise your eyebrows, half impressed, half skeptical. Clara shrugs. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe the snake just didn't feel like finishing the job. Historians still argue whether such anecdotal cures had any real efficacy. Caffeine is a stimulant, sure, it raises the heart rate, could theoretically speed the delivery of venom through the body. So by that logic, coffee might actually make things worse, not better. But then again, applying boiling water, or anything burning hot, might cauterize the wound slightly, or at least feel like you're doing something instead of nothing. And sometimes, that illusion of control is the most powerful medicine of all. You thank Clara and step outside just as the sky begins to brighten. Mist curls low over the sugarcane and coffee rows, turning everything a soft silver. You head back to the field records, now with permission to dig deeper. You find 2 slim, leather-bound volumes that seem promising. Both are weathered and fragile, their pages the color of old parchment. One is a local ledger, listing births, deaths, and occasional injuries with cryptic margin notes like, recovered by herbal water, not expected to survive, did, or simply, snake. One entry stands out. June 3, 1864, juvenile bitten near creek. Administered café e aguardente. No priest available. Survived. Aguardente, Brazilian sugarcane liquor. Probably not recommended by any modern poison control center, but historically a popular option for pain, fear, or spiritual bravery. The other volume is more personal. A travel diary by an unknown visitor, written in a messy but romantic hand. In it, the traveler complains about mosquitoes, praises the mangoes, and includes an oddly detailed account of a snakebite witnessed firsthand. The child screamed, and the women rushed. One held her down while the other brought the boiling pot. No time to cool. She poured it straight onto the leg. I expected more screams, but the child only whimpered. They made her drink, too, though she gagged. They called it the cleansing. You pause, rereading that word, cleansing. Not healing. Not antidote. A ritual, not a prescription. That seems to be the heart of it. In a time when science lived beside saints and midwives, when doctors were far away or completely absent, people found comfort in what they could brew, stir, or chant. Coffee became more than a drink, it was a gesture, a defense, a kind of domestic bravery. You spend the rest of the morning tracing this belief through old correspondence, letters between plantation owners, journals of traveling merchants, one wonderfully bitter letter from a Jesuit who complained that the natives regard coffee more highly than communion. You chuckle at that. Imagine Jesus shaking his head beside a steaming pot, amused but not offended. By noon, you're exhausted. Not just physically, but historically. It's like wandering through a fog of overlapping truths. Every new account contradicts the last, and every anecdote seems to carry more emotion than evidence. You head down to the river, following the sound of splashing. A group of children are wading ankle-deep, tossing pebbles and yelling in the casual Portuguese of those who've never been in a hurry. You sit on a mossy rock and close your eyes. Then something catches your ear. An older boy is telling a story to the younger ones, half teasing, half serious. About a man who was bitten by a cobra while picking wild coffee. But he was fine, the boy insists, because he had a mug on him. Poured it on like holy water. Swore it hissed the poison out. The others laugh, but no one calls him a liar. The story has that durable quality, the kind of tale that outlasts facts. You smile again. Not because you found the truth, but because you're starting to see the shape of the belief. It's less about biology, more about bravery. A cup of something hot. A whispered prayer. And the stubborn hope that the same being that keeps you awake can also keep you alive. Later that evening, after another helping of cassava stew and what may be your 12th mug of coffee since arriving, you sit on the veranda of the main house. The boards creak under your weight, the air is humid and buzzing with insects, and the sky above is an indigo tapestry stitched with the first cautious stars. You're flipping through a copybook, a plantation manager's notes from the 1850s, when you stumble across a passage that makes you stop and blink. Bitten on the heel. Pulse slowing. Applied grinds with candle wax. Rubbed in hard. Gave boiling brew to sip. Child pulled through. Coffee grinds. Candle wax. Rubbed in. You pause. Candle wax? You read it again. It doesn't make much more sense the second time around, but it gives you a clear picture. Someone, in a moment of panic or inherited wisdom, mixed hot wax with coffee dregs and smeared it directly onto a child's snakebite. The child lived. You wonder whether they truly believed it helped, or if it simply gave them something to do with their hands while the hours dragged by, waiting to see if the child would live or die. Historians still argue whether such treatments had any physiological impact. But they agree on one thing: the ritual itself, brewing, grinding, applying, praying, had powerful psychological value in a world with few other comforts. The smell alone, bitter and grounding, could give people the feeling of control in chaos. And as you sit here now, breathing in that same smoky bitterness, you feel the same calm starting to coat your thoughts. Inside the house, someone strikes a match. You hear the familiar clink of the metal coffee pot, the hush of it being filled again. Coffee is no longer a beverage here, it's a background ritual, a clock, a kind of smoky heartbeat. You flip another page. A letter tucked between the sheets falls into your lap. It's delicate, written in sprawling Portuguese with faded brown ink. A woman named Inacia, writing to her cousin in Salvador, shares gossip about plantation marriages, the state of the maize harvest, and, tucked almost carelessly into the end, this. Another bite this week. Young Estevao, chasing frogs in the irrigation ditch. I brewed 2 pots, one for him to drink, one to wash the wound. Poor boy cried, but fever stayed low. Mama says coffee is the breath of the saints. I believe her. You set the letter down. That's the fifth mention you've seen where people refer to coffee not just as drink, but as something holy. Not in a formal church sense, more like a village blessing. The breath of the saints. The belief seems to go beyond science, beyond even folk medicine. It crosses into a strange and tender space. Coffee as comfort, coffee as protector, coffee as the thing you reach for when everything else feels lost. And yet, not all believed it was divine. You find a sharp counterpoint in the form of a dusty field report written by a skeptical civil servant in 1873. His handwriting is precise, the tone clipped. Locals insist on administering café forte before summoning aid. In one case, child expired before arrival of physician. Family declined medical treatment, insisting coffee was working. Education efforts continue. You imagine him, starched collar, ink-stained fingers, fed up with what he calls superstition. You imagine the family, desperate, watching their child slip away, refusing to give up on the only medicine they trusted. There's a sadness there. Not mockery. Just quiet tragedy. Still, most accounts don't end in death. More often, they record confusion, mystery, survival. People who were bitten, treated with coffee, and then lived, not because of the coffee necessarily, but not in spite of it either. One popular tale from the 19th century, retold in a small regional almanac, describes a man named Joachim who claimed to have survived 3 separate snakebites, all thanks to coffee. He insisted that drinking it strong and fast boiled the venom before it reached the heart. The account ends with, Joachim died peacefully in his sleep, age 81. He drank a liter of coffee daily. You can't help but smile. The stars above are brighter now, constellations smeared across the sky like spilled sugar. A gecko scuttles along the beam above you, its feet tapping the wood like quiet rain. From across the veranda, Clara appears again, now holding her own mug. She joins you without speaking, her eyes watching the dark edge of the fields. When she finally speaks, her voice is quiet. I think people needed something to believe in, she says. You nod, not sure if she's talking about coffee, saints, or both. It gave them something to do while they waited. Yes. That too. She sips, then smiles gently. And maybe it helped. You both sit in silence for a long moment, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Then she stands and heads inside. You stay longer, rereading the letter from Anacia, now smoothed flat in your lap. The coffee in your mug has gone lukewarm, but you drink it anyway. For just a moment, you imagine what it was like, 19th century Brazil, snakes in the sugarcane, no hospitals, no antivenom, just family, faith, and a pot kept always on the boil. And somehow, in the middle of that fear, a kind of comfort brewed up too. You wake the next morning, though wake is generous, considering you only drifted in and out of sleep to the rhythm of frogs and creaking rafters. The sun is already high, and the smell of fresh brewed coffee beckons you back into motion. It's stronger today, almost spicy on the air, and you find yourself wondering if Clara added something different. Cinnamon bark? A few crushed peppercorns? At breakfast, the plantation workers are already gathered, seated on rough stools or squatting in the shade. They speak softly, in Portuguese and bits of Yoruba, and everyone's holding a cup. Coffee, black and sharp, is passed around before food, before water, before even morning greetings. It feels almost sacred. You're starting to understand what Clara meant. Coffee isn't just a drink, it's how the day begins, how strength is summoned, how fear is kept at bay. After the meal, one of the older workers, a man with cloud-white hair and skin like river stone, leans toward you. He's missing several teeth but grins as if he knows something you don't. You want to see the real cure, he says. You nod, half curious, half unsure what you're agreeing to. He leads you to a small outbuilding, no larger than a garden shed. Inside, It smells overwhelmingly of roasted beans and something faintly burnt. Hanging from hooks are dried herbs, guava leaves, boldo, crushed root bundles you don't recognize. In the center sits an iron pot, blackened by years of fire. He explains, slowly, pausing often for breath, that his grandfather used to make a paste for snakebites, one that combined coffee grinds, a bit of ash from banana leaves, and juice from crushed passionflower vines. They would heat it until it thickened like tar, then apply it directly to the wound. Sometimes they tied a red thread above the bite. Sometimes they didn't. Did it work, you ask? He shrugs. Sometimes. Historians still argue whether these herbal coffee salves had any measurable effect, but a few studies suggest that some of the plants involved, like boldo and passionflower, may have had calming properties or mild anti-inflammatory effects. As for the coffee, caffeine is known to raise heart rate, which theoretically could spread venom faster, though it's also been proposed that its stimulant effects might help victims stay conscious longer. But those studies are modern. What people had, back then, were stories. And this shed is full of them. The old man, his name is Miguel, you learn, pulls a small leather pouch from a cracked shelf and empties it into your palm. Inside are dried coffee beans, slightly oily, and several bits of serpent skin. He tells you these were from a snake killed after it bit a child. The child lived, and so the family dried part of the snake and mixed the pieces into their coffee for years after, a ritual of warding. You blink. You drank the snake, you ask, unsure whether you misheard. He grins again. Tiny bits. Powdered. With coffee, always. For luck. And maybe something more. In regions where death by venom was an ever-present danger, swallowing even the idea of power, ritual, symbol, legend, was better than nothing. You pocket the beans and the slivers of snake skin, wrapped in cloth with a nod from Miguel. As you step outside, you can hear children playing in the distance. They chant something that sounds like a rhyme, and one of them is beating a rhythm on a hollowed calabash. Clara appears again beside you, holding a bundle of letters. You like stories, she says. It's not a question. She hands you the bundle, tied together with sun-bleached twine. They're all dated between 1832 and 1890, written by doctors, priests, wives, and once, a bored French botanist with very elegant penmanship. The pages are filled with snippets, bits of snake lore, descriptions of symptoms, diagrams of fang marks, and again, coffee. You flip through. One letter, written by a Jesuit missionary stationed in the interior, describes a scene you can almost see. A young girl, 8 or 9, bitten while gathering firewood. Her father makes a fire instantly, boils strong coffee, pours a full mug down her throat even as she cries and gags. They bind the wound, smear it with more coffee grinds. The priest prays. The girl lives. The family says the coffee smoked the demon from her blood. They send a cup to the church as thanks. Another letter, more clinical, written by a visiting surgeon in Rio. I encountered 4 cases in which coffee was administered for snakebite. In all, the patients exhibited rapid heart rate, dilated pupils, and emotional calm. One woman claimed to see her deceased husband after the second cup. I suspect delirium. You chuckle softly. Emotional calm and hallucinations, 2 things that might be very welcome in a snakebite scenario. You keep reading. One note is written in the corner of a page, no evidence. But it made them feel less alone. That one sticks with you. The idea that, in the middle of fear and fever and venom and doubt, a hot cup of something strong and bitter could act like armor. Not because it cured, but because it comforted. Even if it didn't save lives every time, it helped people wait. It helped people hope. And sometimes, that's enough. As you return to the main house, the sun now heavy in the sky, you notice that Clara has brewed another batch. This time, it smells sweet, almost floral. She tells you she added jasmine blossoms, just a few. In the dry months, she says, they would add petals to honor Yemanja, goddess of water. She was supposed to draw the poison away. Did it work? Again, the shrug. The smile. Sometimes. Later that evening, you wander into the modest plantation chapel. The wooden pews are uneven, and the roof leaks in 3 predictable places. A statue of Saint Benedict, chipped but dignified, leans slightly forward as if eavesdropping on your thoughts. You sit near the back, fingers still stained faintly from handling old coffee grinds and snake skin earlier. There's something oddly holy about this setting. Not because of the worn altar or the hymns scratched into the walls, but because of what happens after dusk. That's when the workers come, quietly, in 2s and 3s, and share stories beneath the cross. Tonight, someone speaks of a cousin in Goyas who survived a Bothrop's bite after being drenched in a cold bath, then given strong coffee laced with garlic. Another man shakes his head and insists it was the black stone, a mysterious pebble you press into a wound to draw the poison. Coffee, garlic, black stone. Hope, doubt, ritual. Historians still debate the origins of the so-called viper stones. Some argue they were imported from India, others that they were fashioned from the gallstones of animals. Brazilians didn't much care about the chemical origins. They cared that the stone could be boiled, dried, reused, and most importantly, that it worked in someone's memory. The next speaker in the chapel is a young woman named Lucia. Her story is recent. Last year, her brother was bitten on the ankle by a suracucu. He swelled and gasped, and they had no doctor. But their grandmother gave him bitter coffee, not once but 5 times in an hour. Then she sang lullabies in Yoruba until the boy calmed. He survived. Maybe it was the song, Lucia says. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was the silence afterward. Everyone nods. You feel it, too, the deep need to make sense of chaos, to tether pain to some controllable object. A cup of coffee. A song. A whispered prayer. You leave the chapel just as the oil lamp gutters out, your skin warm with candlelight and second-hand courage. You spend the next few days exploring a different kind of archive, not a library, but the kitchens. These, Clara explains, are the real heart of the plantation. It's where remedies were tested, poultices stirred, and every snakebite cure ever heard about was given at least one try. The kitchen smells of roasted beans, yes, but also vinegar, citrus rinds, cassava flour, and sometimes the sharp musk of dried tobacco leaves. Everything here has a purpose. Even the coffee that burns slightly at the bottom of the pan is saved, scraped, and added to salves. Today's cook, Dona Mirela, offers to show you a demonstration of one of the more obscure treatments, a foot soak in warm, spiced coffee mixed with maracuja juice. She says it was thought to draw out bad blood from below the heart. You watch as she prepares the basin, muttering under her breath about how her great-aunt claimed to have cured a venomous bite this way in 1871. Historians still debate whether venom could ever be pulled from the body through the feet, but there's a long tradition of drawing poisons downward, often through poultices, gravity, or even bleeding. It's less about science and more about symbolism. The poison leaves you the same way fear does, slowly, and through your soles. You step into the warm bath. It smells like a strange espresso cocktail and feels oddly soothing. The maracuja lends a silky acidity that clings to your toes. There's no snakebite on you, thankfully, but your nerves calm anyway. Clara watches from the doorway. We tried everything, she says. You would, too, if you lived out here. And you know she's right. If faced with fangs and fever, you'd try the coffee. The herbs. The songs. Anything, night again. The moon is full, and it makes every path look paved with silver. You sit with Clara and some of the older workers around a small fire. The mood is different tonight, more serious, almost ceremonial. Someone has brought out a cloth bag filled with bone dice and coffee beans. It's time, they say, for the test of the sleeping bite. You've never heard of it, and your curiosity perks up. The ritual, explained in low voices, was used to predict who might encounter a snake in the coming season. One person tosses the beans and dice onto a woven mat. The shapes they form, combined with the way the beans land, cracked, whole, dark, pale, are interpreted like tea leaves. You're invited to try. You roll. A cluster forms near the edge of the mat, the dice showing a pair of sixes and one solitary two. Several beans land dark side up. Clara leans in. It means a close call, she murmurs. But with protection. Coffee as oracle. As ward. As something more than just bitter water. Historians often sideline such folk rituals, calling them superstition. But anthropologists are more generous. They understand that in rural Brazil, where medicine was scarce and danger slithered underfoot, belief systems acted as survival tools. You ask if people still do this now. Clara nods. Only during the harvest moon. Only with fresh roasted beans. You stay by the fire long after the others drift to sleep, thinking of all the rituals humanity invents to push back the dark. Candles, incantations, a stubborn little drink made from bitter seeds. Midweek, you're invited to ride with Clara to a neighboring fazenda. The path is long and winding, through dense brush and rustling grasses. She rides well. You, less so. The other plantation is older, more run down, but its owner, a man named Jacinto, welcomes you with a firm handshake and a pot of fresh brewed coffee. It tastes different here. Stronger. A little burnt. You pretend not to wince. Jacinto insists on showing you his healing records. You imagine charts and measurements, but what he hands you is a notebook filled with messy entries: date, name, type of snake, remedy used, and whether the patient lived. It's sobering. One entry reads: July 3rd, Marietta, bitten near knee. Applied graviola root poultice. Gave 2 cups coffee with cachaca. Swelling receded. Lived. Another. August 12th, Diego, age 11. Bitten picking guavas. No coffee available. Fever worsened. Died after 2 nights. You run your fingers over the dried ink. Coffee, it seems, was more than custom here, it was logistics. If they had it, they used it. If they didn't, the outcome was worse. Historians still argue whether access to coffee correlated with survival, or if it simply overlapped with better general care. But among locals, the link felt indisputable. Jacinto closes the book gently. Coffee gives people something to do, he says. When there's nothing else. That's the power. That night, on the return ride, you see a small snake cross the trail. You freeze. Clara calmly waits for it to pass. She smiles. It's not the snakes you see that get you. You breathe in. The scent of coffee, dust, and something old fills your lungs. Back at Clara's fazenda, you notice an old cabinet near the back porch you hadn't opened before. It smells of camphor and damp paper. Inside, dozens of empty coffee tins, neatly stacked. On each one, a date. A name. Sometimes a small snake drawn in charcoal. You ask Clara about them. They're for the ones who made it, she says. And the ones who didn't. It's a kind of shrine. A record not in ink or type, but tin and ritual. The cans once held beans that were brewed in times of fear, poured into feverish mouths, dabbed onto trembling skin. Each one marks an attempt. You lift one tin and shake it. There's a soft rattle. Inside, a pebble and a folded slip of paper. He didn't scream, it reads. There's grief here, but also pride. Coffee wasn't just medicine, it was memory. You ask Clara if the tradition continues. She shrugs. We try. But now, the young ones want pills. They don't believe in bitter things anymore. You sit on the porch with her, watching the sun slip behind the hills. She hands you a cup. It's stronger today, nearly black. You sip slowly, and it burns a little. Sometimes, she says, you need to feel the bite to believe in the cure. The wind stirs the coffee tins gently, and they chime like bells. The next day is market day, and Clara insists you come along. The village is small, just a cluster of sun-warped buildings and shade trees, but the plaza buzzes with energy. Children weave through stalls, vendors shout half-heartedly, and somewhere a parrot is yelling obscenities it must have learned from a sailor. Your eyes fall on a woman selling small bundles wrapped in palm leaf. She sees you looking and holds one up. Snake cure, she says in accented Portuguese. Guaranteed. You open it. Inside, crushed coffee beans, chili powder, a pinch of charcoal. You laugh. Spicy snake medicine? She nods solemnly. Take it with cachaca. Or rub it on the skin. You buy two. Historians still debate the role of alcohol in folk remedies. Was it sterilizing, numbing, or just comforting? Probably all three. But adding coffee to the mix was common, especially in Brazil's rural interior. At another stall, you spot a crudely drawn pamphlet. Café contra a mort, coffee against death. It features a stick figure battling a snake with a steaming mug. Satire? Advertisement? Prayer? You buy that, too. As you wander, you hear older folks whispering about the old ways, how their grandparents used to roast beans with holy water or recite psalms while grinding them. The line between medicine and magic blurs easily here, and no one seems to mind. You return with your treasures, 2 cures, 1 cartoon death fighter, and a deepening sense that coffee wasn't just Brazil's export, it was its talisman. You step into the bustling port of Santos, Brazil's key artery for coffee exports, where crates of beans are piled higher than a priest's patience during carnival. Sailors with sun-leathered faces unload burlap sacks, each wafting the nutty, toasted scent of roasted fortune. The port hums not only with commerce but with chatter, mostly about coffee prices, brewing tricks, and yes, its curious new reputation as a cure-all, including for those who've been kissed by snakes. A dockhand swears that black coffee kept his cousin from turning green after a coral snake bite. You raise an eyebrow. He raises a cup. Same thing. This is where belief, commerce, and convenience swirl like crema in a demitasse. Medical pamphlets are passed hand to hand, some warning against coffee's stimulating effects, others insisting it's God's answer to everything but heartbreak. Historians still debate whether these claims arose from genuine folk experiments or from the booming coffee trade's marketing desperation. But standing here among the sun-baked crates, you begin to see how even a snakebite could be made into good business. You follow one of the coffee caravans inland, its oxen slow but stubborn. Along the bumpy trail, you overhear stories shared in hushed tones by drovers, of children nursed back from snakebite delirium with nothing but hot coffee and whispered prayers. In these interior towns, far from the polished doctors of Rio, belief is stitched together from scraps, the midwife's advice, the priest's mutterings, the traveling tanner's gossip. Coffee is everywhere, anyway. Why not pour it into a wound? Historians still argue whether this rural improvisation came from desperation or conviction. A drover with half a mustache and a lazy eye insists that brewing café forte and swabbing it on a bite draws out the bad blood. He also believes sneezing scares away jungle spirits. You nod politely. The logic isn't linear, but in the hot, highlands air, it's hard to say what is. Arriving in a sleepy mountain town, you're ushered into a modest pharmacy that smells of herbs and floor wax. Behind the counter is a pharmacist with ink-stained fingers and a fondness for guinea pigs. He shows you a handwritten book of folk cures, most involving coffee in some form, boiled, ground, diluted, or simply waved near the nose. One entry reads, apply cooled grounds to fong marks. If patient still breathes, give sweetened brew. That's medicine, apparently. When you ask if any of it actually works, he shrugs and offers a cup. It can't hurt, he says. Unlike the snake. Historians still wonder whether pharmacists propagated these remedies as true beliefs or as winks to skeptical customers. You sip the offered brew and glance at the book again. Some recipes sound more like dessert instructions than emergency care. But in a town where doctors visit by mule once a season, coffee might just be as close to hope as anyone gets that a local priest invites you to join an evening gathering beneath the chapel's worn beams. Here, by candlelight, elders swap stories of miracles, minor and otherwise. One woman swears her daughter, bit by a snake while picking guavas, recovered after her grandmother brewed a rescue coffee, double strength, cooled with lime water, and served with whispered Hail Marys. The line between medicine and ritual blurs easily in this place. Faith flows into daily life like coffee into a chipped porcelain cup. The priest smiles gently when you ask if these cures are official doctrine. The church prefers wine, he says. But the people believe what saves them. Historians still discuss whether such folk Christian rituals around coffee arose organically or were encouraged by clergy trying to anchor health remedies in something sacred. You sit back and let the candlelight flicker. Someone refills your cup. If it's not holy, it's at least warming. You head deeper into Brazil's interior and arrive in Quilombo, an Afro-Brazilian settlement, founded by people who escaped slavery and built their own communities. Here, knowledge isn't stored in dusty libraries but passed through songs, drumming, and the calm hands of elders. You're invited to watch a healer work. She dries herbs, grinds seeds, and, yes, brews coffee as part of her healing arsenal. The snakebite, she tells you, needs fire to chase out the cold. Coffee, being fiery, is both drink and salve. You watch her rub grounds into a bite-shaped gourd to demonstrate. Historians still dispute whether African traditions influenced Brazil's belief in coffee's healing powers, or if it emerged independently. But here, in this village that pulses with life, music, and memory, the line between healing and heritage runs deep, and the coffee pot never cools. The day is hot, and your path leads through a fazenda that looks more like a kingdom than a farm. Grand columns, mosaic floors, and slaves shuffling silently behind wheelbarrows of fresh-picked beans. You're offered a seat by the overseer, who serves you coffee in a silver cup, all while regaling you with tales of how they saved a boy from a snakebite with black coffee and firm discipline. You smile tightly. The realities of slavery sit thick in the humid air. Historians still debate whether plantation owners believed in coffee's medicinal power or simply lacked real doctors for their enslaved laborers. It's possible the belief was more excuse than cure. But in these estates, where coffee is king and humanity often a footnote, even a superstition can be bent to justify nearly anything. You sip in silence and look at the workers. They are watching the snakes in the grass more than the overseer. A traveling doctor from Rio de Janeiro joins you on your journey. His leather case is full of curious instruments and a tiny silver tin of instant coffee powder. For emergencies, he smirks. He tells you that the urban medical community is split. Some dismiss the coffee snakebite cure as rural nonsense, others think there might be something to it, perhaps a placebo, perhaps a mild stimulant effect that delays collapse. The mind, he says, believes what it needs to believe. Historians still argue whether these physicians contributed to the myth by using coffee as a stimulant in low-supply regions or tried in vain to stamp out the practice. You walk together along the trail, swapping stories. He offers you a bitter swig from the silver tin. Tastes awful, he says. But you'll feel alive. You glance nervously at the bushes. Hopefully not too alive. In a small town square, a troupe of actors performs a traveling medicine show. There are juggling priests, a fake bishop, and a woman who faints on cue after being bitten by a papier-mâché snake. The crowd gasps. A man in a flamboyant cape rushes in with a cup of coffee. One dramatic sip later, the woman is cured, dancing a little samba to prove it. The crowd cheers. You, seated beside a pig on a leash, clap along. This is part theater, part sales pitch, the performers sell vials of miracle coffee elixir afterward. Historians still puzzle over whether these troops spread folk belief or merely capitalized on it. Either way, it's working. A child tugs at your sleeve and asks if you'd buy a bottle for his mom's rheumatism. You do. Just in case night falls, and you find yourself in a cramped kitchen with a grandmother who's more myth than matron. She tells you she survived 5 snake bites, 3 lightning strikes, and 1 opera singer husband. Her secret? Coffee. Stronger than regret. She brews you a cup so dark it could stain time itself. Pour it on a bite, drink what's left, she advises. Then yell at the snake. Works every time. You laugh, but part of you wonders. Historians still argue whether such oral traditions were acts of resistance, pragmatism, or comedy turned into cultural currency. She pats your hand and adds, "Don't believe everything you hear. Except this. Coffee works. Or you die." You sip the brew. It burns, but only a little. You notice a new social dance step being practiced in the shaded courtyard outside the doctor's office, one that oddly mimics the movements of someone stepping carefully away from a snake. Coincidence? Maybe. But you overhear that it's part of a public health campaign, educational theater as epidemic prevention. A local doctor thought it might help people visualize how to remain calm during a bite incident, and now it's the village's favorite pastime. Historians still debate whether this kind of performative pedagogy ever made a real difference, but there's no doubt it left an imprint, especially when the mayor's wife twisted her ankle mid-rehearsal and blamed it on the imaginary snake. That may be the only time anyone's yelled, "Call the coffee pot," in public. The dry season arrives with an extra helping of snakes, and now the cafes are advertising bite-hour blends for emergencies. You don't know whether to laugh or sip, but you settle for both. Local physicians begin publishing pamphlets about mixing coffee with salt, honey, or even clay, depending on the region's folk remedies. One even suggests applying the grounds directly to the wound, followed by a stiff espresso. Was it effective? Hard to say. What's clear is that Brazil in 1879 had no shortage of creative solutions, some sound, some slightly caffeinated chaos. And yes, historians still disagree whether the clay was truly medicinal or just a relic of ancient Amazonian superstition. You wander past the docks again and find yourself watching the loading of a shipment labeled simply curativo, meaning healing. Inside are jars of snake oil, literally, mixed with black syrup and flecks of ground arabica. The label reads, "To be taken after bites or before unwanted family visits." No one's quite sure if it's a joke or just brutally honest marketing. The clerk says it was inspired by a traveling apothecary who once claimed his brother survived a coral snake bite thanks to laughter and lukewarm coffee. Historians still argue whether this concoction actually sold well or was just a footnote in Brazil's long list of snake-fueled fads. Tonight, there's a moonlight festival in town, and as you sip your coffee and listen to the hum of strings and flutes, you're pulled into an old wives' tale being reenacted around the bonfire. It's the story of a boy raised by snakes, who could only be cured by weaning him off venom with café com leite. It's told with such passion that you nearly forget how absurd it sounds. Yet these oral histories, however exaggerated, shaped beliefs. They preserved anxieties, hopes, and caffeinated cures in every retelling. Whether the boy existed or not, historians still argue, but the story endures like a gentle echo through time. At a tiny clinic outside the city, a local nurse demonstrates a first aid ritual involving coffee-soaked cloths, lemon rinds, and the recitation of saints' names in descending order of caffeine strength. Yes, really. St. Lawrence gets a strong brew. St. Anthony gets decaf. You watch in hushed awe as the steps are performed slowly and reverently, like a sleepy ballet. Historians believe this practice may have originated from a blend of Catholicism and Yoruba healing chants brought over during the transatlantic slave trade. Whether the coffee helped or just soothed the nerves is unclear, but the ritual, like so much else, has outlasted the science. you wander into a seminar hosted by a slightly eccentric botanist who insists that coffee trees vibrate with protective energy, especially during snake season. He gestures toward a plant in a clay pot, claiming it buzzes faintly when danger is near. You lean in. Nothing. But his passion is contagious. He references old indigenous beliefs that caffeine-bearing plants ward off malice, human or reptilian. It's charming, even if not peer-reviewed. Historians still debate whether this was mystical belief or early placebo. You just enjoy the thought that a tree might be humming a lullaby to keep you safe. In the archives of a dusty, unmanned museum, you discover a faded diagram titled, "Coffee Remedies for Serpentine Afflictions." It's shaped like a family tree, branching into bizarre directions: roasted poultices, bitter bean tinctures, snakebite bracelets laced with caffeine-soaked fabric. You spend an hour just decoding it. Turns out, it was part of a failed government pamphlet campaign in 1885. Historians still argue if the project was quietly scrapped or just lost in a shuffle of bureaucratic confusion, but the diagram remains, proof of a strange, bean-brewed ambition to civilize serpents with sips and speculation. At a twilight church service, you hear a sermon gently connecting coffee, vigilance, and spiritual fortitude, so you do not slumber when sin, or serpents, approach. It gets a sleepy chuckle from the congregation. You realize that even religion has folded coffee into its fables. Priests distribute tiny cups after confession. Candles flicker near murals showing saints with steaming mugs, repelling coils of snakes with nothing but calm eyes and good posture. Historians still debate whether these images were literal or metaphorical, but the fusion of daily ritual and divine comfort couldn't be clearer, or cozier. Outside a boarding school for girls, a teacher explains that each student is taught the 3 Cs: cleanliness, caution, and coffee. Especially in rural areas, young women were trained to carry small sachets of roasted grounds, not just for refreshment, but as part of their basic safety kit. In case you're bitten, the teacher whispers with a wink, "At least you'll be awake." Historians still debate if this was widespread practice or a regional quirk, but for these students, coffee was more than a drink, it was confidence in a cup. As you lay down on a creaky wooden bench overlooking the sugar fields, an old man shares his memory of being bitten, not by a snake, but by the fear of one. He recalls how his grandmother brewed a pot so strong it made his teeth hum, and how she whispered stories of beans powerful enough to banish venom. "I never saw a snake again," he says. "But I did see her smile." It's the kind of story historians can't measure, but it lingers, like the smell of ground coffee at dusk, and the hush that follows. Back in the heart of the market district, you catch sight of a traveling sales cart stacked high with oddities, snake-shaped teacups, mini sacks of roasted beans labeled "First Aid," and a game for children called Bite and Brew. The vendor claims it teaches survival skills through pretend venom extraction and caffeine rituals. You try not to laugh when a child offers you a healing espresso shot, made of water and imagination. These playful echoes of serious fears, distilled into toys and trinkets, offer a glimpse into how communities soften the sharp edges of real dangers. Historians still argue whether these commercialized traditions diluted the original folk knowledge or preserved it in whimsical disguise. You follow a narrow alley that leads to a mural, faded but still beautiful, depicting a line of women handing coffee beans to one another across a lush jungle backdrop. A plaque beside it reads, "Lineage of Protectors." It turns out this was once the site of an all-female medical co-op that believed snakebites were best treated not only with coffee but with communal calm. They brewed in silence, worked in sync, and treated dozens during the 1883 outbreak. Historians still debate whether the efficacy lay in the brew or the collective serenity, but it's clear they were onto something both practical and poetic. A quiet corner of the local library contains handwritten journals by a Portuguese priest who became obsessed with coffee's divine bitterness. One entry details his theory that bitterness itself was a spiritual antidote to sin, and possibly to venom. He brewed elaborate infusions and tested them on non-lethal snake bites, his own arm, once. The results were mixed, the theology more so, but his faith in the cup never wavered. Historians still argue whether he was a proto-scientist or just a particularly dramatic barista in clerical robes. Either way, he left behind a manuscript titled Serpentum et Caffeum. Latins never sounded so cozy. By now, the village has begun preparing for the change of season, a time when snakes grow restless and the scent of roasted beans thickens in the air. You spot posters for something called the brew and blessing ritual, where villagers gather to pour the first batch of the season into the earth as a symbolic shield. Children run around tossing bean pods like confetti. Some say it's all just tradition now, others claim it worked at least once. Historians still debate whether these seasonal rites had measurable outcomes. But the scent lingers in the soil, a quiet offering to peace. Atop a quiet hill, a midwife recounts a legend to a circle of mothers sipping coffee from chipped enamel cups. It's the tale of a woman who, bitten while in labor, delivered both her baby and a half-page herbal remedy still quoted in backwoods clinics. Strong coffee, bitter roots, and no fear, she says, tapping her cup. The story has traveled by whispers for generations, half myth, half midwifery lore. Historians still argue if it's based on a real event, but in homes across Brazil, the instructions remain scribbled on yellowed paper and passed down in quiet, steaming moments. You're invited into a rural classroom, where the teacher leads children in an old folk rhyme: sip it dark, sip it deep, keep the snakes out while you sleep. It's adorable and oddly haunting. They recite it before lunch, before exams, before hikes. The teacher explains how generations of oral memory wrapped medical wisdom in lullabies. Some even believe the rhythm helps steady the heart after a scare. Historians still debate whether the rhyme originated during a true snakebite epidemic or was invented to make kids drink their bitter coffee, but its melody stays with you long after the class ends. One final visit takes you to a modest home where a grandfather shows off his bite shelf, a wooden rack holding jars of old grounds, snakeskin talismans, and a photo of his cousin sipping coffee with one hand and pinching a snake behind the head with the other. She was quicker than the bite, he says proudly. Whether it's truth or tall tale, the pride is real. Historians may never prove every detail, but oral traditions like this hold history differently, not in accuracy, but in affection. And sometimes, that's the more enduring medicine. The sun sets on the old road where coffee carts used to rumble by like small temples on wheels. You see none now, just wool tracks and faint memories. But locals say that during dry snake seasons, some still brew double-strength coffee and leave a cup outside overnight, so the snakes will smell it and stay away. No one knows if it works. Historians still debate if it's deterrent or just dreamy habit. Either way, it's a sweet image, the jungle's edge held at bay by the scent of hope and roast. Now, as twilight folds over the valley, you watch the coffee trees sway, their leaves whispering stories of fears softened and seasons survived. Nearby, someone lights a lantern beside a sign that reads, "In beans we trust." You smile. There's a warmth in knowing that, true or not, people once believed in something so earthy and aromatic as protection. Historians still argue over where science ends and solace begins, but here, among trees and tales, you feel the blend is perfect. No panic. Just peace in a cup. And now, as your journey slows, you find a quiet seat beside the oldest coffee tree in the village. Its roots stretch into the past, where myth and medicine mingle like steam on the surface of a night-brewed cup. You hear nothing but the soft hum of insects and the distant trickle of a stream, where someone may or may not have once thrown their snake-bitten boot and walked home healed by hot coffee and luck. The story's truth doesn't matter much anymore. What matters is the calm it brings, the hush it holds. You breathe in the cooling air and feel the story wrap around you like a blanket. Let yourself melt into stillness now. There's nothing more to hear, no more snakes, no more cures to test. Only the slow comfort of a night well traveled, a story well steeped in warmth and whimsy. Let your body settle like grounds at the bottom of an old porcelain cup. No need to stir, just rest. Out there, coffee beans still ripen under the same moon. Some old widow still sips her bedtime brew and tells her grandchildren that once, it kept the venom away. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But the warmth it offered? That part's always real. You're safe here. Let your thoughts drift like steam. Let the words recede like footprints in dry soil. Tomorrow, there will be more stories, more slow histories curled around small truths and tiny joys. But for now, breathe. Let the background hum of your room, your breath, the world outside, replace the jungle, the firelight, the dancing cups. They're still there, waiting, but they can wait. Close your eyes. Sink in. Sleep.